Alright, hey everybody, it's me, Nicode, and today we're going to be bringing you a HackerRank solution to time conversion. This is a really awesome excuse for you to break out your coding skills and, learn a little bit more about C#. We're solving this in C# as usual. C#, the dot substring method, and a little bit about how time and numbers work in C#. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Alright, so here today we are looking at the HackerRank practice algorithm warm-up time conversion. Alright, and so what's this asking us? Given a time in 12-hour AM/PM format, convert it to military 24-hour time. Midnight is 12:00:00 AM on a 12-hour clock, and 00:00:00 on a 24-hour clock. Noon is 12:00:00 on a 12-hour clock and 12 on a 24-hour clock, blah, 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 blah. Here's the input format, hours, hours, minutes, minutes, seconds, seconds, AM, where 01 is less than HH, or less than or equal to 12. This is just a mathematical way of saying that the hours have to be between 1 and 12. And the minutes and seconds have to be between 0 and 59. All input times are valid, that's a constraint, and then we want the output to come out in military time. Alright, interesting enough. So here we have our sample input of 7:05 and 45 seconds PM, and that's going to come out to 19:05 and 45 seconds PM. As always, we're just going to grab whatever's already in here and delete it. Starting from scratch, because we're going to do this basically on our own. And so the first thing we type in here is using system, because we're going to be using the most basic built-in C# system methods. And then we are going to want to declare our first, or define our first class, or declare, I don't know, correct me on which terminology to use there. We have the class is the solution. This is where all of our code is going to exist. And then we write this static void main string array args, and that will take in the console information, so the input that we're reading, and the static and the void are basically saying that this isn't attached to another object. This is a method that is running in its own vacuum, pretty much. I don't know. Alright, so what are we going to want to do? We want to take in this input of the time. So we'll start with a string time equals console.readLine. Easy enough. It's just going to read that time and give it back to our program as a string. And because of this, we are going to need to do some parsing because we're working with numbers here. So the next variable we set up is an integer h, which will be representative of the hours. And we'll do our int parse to tell the computer that it is working with numbers and not a string. And then we'll take time, and here's where we first see our dot substring method. So what dot substring will do is it will take in two arguments, the first of which is the character space in our string, and the second of which is how many characters we will be taking in. Substring extracts a fragment of an existing string, and so the first argument is going to be our start point, if you will, and the start point of the hour, again, looking at our input, is going to be 0. Coding language, programming, we use 0 as the first spot. So 0, the 0th space is going to be the first spot that we look at for the hour. And then we are going to want to put in our second argument, which is the length of the substring, and that will be 2, because there's 2 spots available for the hour. And so that should feed us back our hour. Next, we're going to type string AM PM. This is going to handle whether or not the time is AM or PM. And if we look at our input example, we can see that this is, 9 spots over it. So we'll say 8, because we're counting 0 as a number here, and we're going to take two characters, so the P and the M are the A and the M, for example. And so now we are taking in the hours, and we're taking in whether or not it's AM, PM. This is the only information that our code is going to need to know in order to run correctly, because it is turning your standard 12-hour time into military time. We're not doing anything to the minutes, we're not doing anything to the seconds. So it's only going to need to know the hours, the hour spot, and whether or not it is AM or PM. So next we're going to write our first if statement. And so this if statement is going to test for the possibility of whether whether the time is AM or PM. So we'll start by typing if AM PM equals AM, and this is going to be checking if our time is AM, then H, so if AM PM equals AM, then we're going to put, this is going to be like a layered if statement, so an if statement in an if statement, so if AM PM equals AM and H, our hour, equals 12, then H equals 0, right? So 12 AM is 0 AM, according to this clock. And then we will stay inside these brackets. H equals 0, console.write, we'll put 0 because that will take up the 0 space of the time. We only have 1 digit. Plus H, plus, we're going to have to remember to put the colon in there for the time. And then plus time dot substring. And now we got to figure out 0, 1, 2, 3. So 4 spots over is where the time starts after the hour, right? So after that colon, so we'll say 3, and then we'll want to fill in basically the remaining 5 characters. So this will just add the rest of the time that we want to see, changing the first hour. Remember to put our semicolon there, and then we will add an else if. This checks for what else is there. So we use the test if AM PM equals AM, and then if H equals 12, and now we're checking if AM PM equals PM. So the way you're going to want to set up these if statements is you want to test the most restrictive conditions first, and then continue with the less restrictive conditions. So for instance, we're only checking if it was AM and if it was 12, and now we're going to be checking if AM PM is just PM. So this is like a more broad piece of code that we're about to embark on. Else if AM PM equals PM, if H bang equals 12, and now this little bit of code means does not equal 12. So an exclamation point before equal sign means doesn't equal 12. So if H doesn't equal 12, and it's PM, because 12 PM is noon, and given our current code that is we don't need to convert anything. So if it doesn't equal 12, now we're going to run the actual conversion code, which looks like console.write H plus 12. This adds 12 to the existing number. So in the case where it is 7 PM, it's going to add 12 to it to make 19, which is the military time for 7. Alright, and then we add plus the colon and brackets are in quotes plus time dot substring 35, and now this time substring 35 is essentially just becoming shorthand for the rest of the time that we want to add to anything. Alright, and then if alright, and if not, we'll just write console.write H plus colon plus time dot substring 35. Throw in the semicolon there, can't forget. So this is asking, this is basically saying if it doesn't equal 12, add 12 to it, or else just write it out. So this is handling all the PMs, even the condition where it is 12 PM. This is handling all the AMs. Well, technically just the condition where it's 12 AM. It doesn't need to handle the other AMs because you wouldn't need to convert anything for 7 AM, 8 AM, 9 AM. These are inputs that don't need to be converted. But in the case where it is 1 PM, we want to change that to 13, and it would just add 12 to 1, and hopefully this code would work. Well, let's see. We're gonna have some problems. Alright, and this is this stupid thing. Alright, cool. So there we got it to run. There was a bracket right here that shouldn't have been right there. Curly bracket. Yeah. Alright, so we passed it, it worked, and we got some more points in Hacker Ring. Pretty cool.